Okay, so once again, let's review. So, you can't make disciples unless you know what a disciple is. You can't be a disciple unless you know what a disciple is. If you can't define what a disciple is, you certainly can't make disciples. So, what is a disciple?
Follower of Jesus.
Yes, someone who follows Jesus.
Being changed by Jesus.
Being changed. Why did we add changed instead of just follow? Because aren't you just going to change if you follow Jesus?
No.
Not necessarily, right? You also have to
If
obey him.
We didn't need discipleship.
Right, then we wouldn't need disciple. What else? Follow, changed, and mission, right? And reminder, that's Matthew 4:19. Come, follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men. In the invitation is the definition. So he's not unclear. He's saying, this is who you are, this is what I'm going to do, this is what it means, right from the very beginning. He doesn't tell them later, which is important, because when someone decides they want to be a Christian, are they deciding that they believe something about Jesus, or are they becoming a follower of Jesus? Are they just deciding? Or are they entering into a process? It's a process. So there's just the starting line, right? And so this is what a disciple is, but we all know that it's not very linear, right? Discipleship is it's a process. And why do we have to explain that? Because it is not linear. Remember the squiggly line. It's not where I lord over you. It goes in stages. And everybody needs different things at different stages. And our role, if we're going to be disciple makers, is to pay attention to where somebody's at and what they need, and help them with what they need, not give them what we think they need. And we have the Holy Spirit to guide us in figuring that out. But one of the things God's given us is this thing right here, and we can pay attention too. We can open our eyes and say, man, when someone is an infant, right, or they're dead, or they are a child, or a young adult, or a parent, they each need different things, crucial things. What's the thing that an infant needs more than anything?
Parent.
Yeah, they need a parent. But they could have a cruel, distant, abusive parent, right? They need love. And yes, that would be ideal with a parent. What about a child? What do they absolutely need to negotiate being a child and become a successful human? Guidance, discipline, right? What about a young adult? Vision. Young adults need to know who they are and where they're going, or they're in trouble. That's why everyone worries about college. Even though college isn't necessarily going to answer any of those questions, everyone's like, oh, where are you going to go to college? You know, it's like, that's like what everyone's freaked out about. And it's like, where are you choosing to go and be formed? Should be the question. And what are you being formed into? And what do you want to become? And while you're at that said school, who are you going to be? Who are you going to be and who are you going to become? Those are important questions. And if you don't know those, you're not going to navigate that stage very well, right? What about a parent? You absolutely have to have this to be a parent. Children. You can't learn how to be a parent without having spiritual children. So, believe it or not, this is the most difficult concept to explain to the church body. You're not mature because you know more. You're not mature because you're older or you've been a Christian longer. What makes you mature is how well you are loving other people through these stages. Maturity equals parenting. Maturity equals willingness to bring anyone else along. So if you're saying it's a process, and this is sort of the top of the process, we all know that even though it's not linear, that's also very layered, right? that people are sometimes mature in some ways, and in other ways, very immature. Maybe emotionally immature in one way and spiritually mature in another place, and maybe in other areas they're very knowledgeable, but they're not very mature about how to use that knowledge. You see this with the disciples all the time, where they're learning about God's power, and they're like, can we call fire down from heaven on these people that are being rude? And it's like, no. What do you mean? Can we?
And why would you?
Why would you do that? No, wrong. This is not what we're doing, right? It's like, should we call fire down from heaven, which would be cool, like you can imagine it, is power, but not really intelligent use of God's power. That is why I just think it's so crucial that we understand that discipleship is a process. And so if you can't remember any of this, remember it is a process, and it is messy business, and that maturity is being willing to walk somebody through that. Then when you actually get engaged in that, let's say that you actually take up the call of discipleship. You say, yes, I am a follower of Jesus, but it is not just my job to follow Jesus. It is also my responsibility to care about and help anybody else along the way. Once you decide that, now you're in a whole new game. It's not go to church. It's to learn and then go home. It's go to church to be encouraged, to be refilled, so that I can get in the game. The game being like, I'm going to help anybody else follow Jesus. So Christianity isn't just for me. It's equipping me to be able to help somebody else, right? And so it's like going from student to teacher. It's that shift in mentality. And once you do that, it gets really confusing really fast. And that's why I always do this wrong. God's part, my part, and their part. And unless you get this sorted pretty well, and you're going to be really frustrated and really confused all the time, because you're going to be doing their part when you should be doing your part. Or you're going to be doing God's part when you should be doing your part. So then you have to learn, if you're going to be a very good parent, there are some things you cannot do. You can't make your kids do things. There's things that only God can do in them, right? And there's some things that, that you actually can do. Like challenge your kids, encourage your kids, check in on your kids. One thing that Cassie's dad is a godly man, and love him. He is a pastor. He has so much influence in his kids' lives. They so respect him. A random phone call from dad, checking in and just saying, hi, I love you. How are you doing? How do you think that would impact my wife? Massive. Right? He doesn't think that she would even want that or need that. That would never cross his mind as a thing that he should be doing. Because he totally he might call her for advice. He's a very humble, mature, godly man. But that's missing something, isn't it? He has a part as her parent. That even a little tiny thing like, hey, how you doing, is going to make a big impact. It's a miss, right? So we miss things all the time when we're not doing our little part. And that's why I'm glad it's small. This is not to scale. God's part is bigger than my part. But there are just some things that we can only do together, right? There's only things that we can do when God's working. And there's things that if I'm not right with God, none of this is going to go anywhere. And then we started talking a little bit about the vine and the branches. And then this is where it gets really fun. So we got the vine and the branches. These are the trainings of Jesus. You got a vine and the branches with some pruning involved. What are the other examples we got from Jesus that we talked about? Pigs and pearls. I'll just write the words instead of drawing it. Vine and branches. He usually pairs things. Pigs and pearls. What else?
Snake and dove.
Hmm?
The snake and the dove.
Yep, the serpent and the dove. What else?
The dogs and what's holy.
Yeah, dogs and what's holy, which is similar to it's similar to the pigs and pearls. And the thing sticking out of your eye.
Plank and speck.
The plank in the speck. What's the biggest problem in the world?
Me.
Yep. So if we were going to summarize, we talked about the difference between judgment and being judgmental, but you guys remembering these?
Yes.
You're tracking with me? Okay, so there is not an example that I can think of that the stuff I'm giving you, that if you're trying to disciple people, this isn't the stuff that always comes up. I can't come up with an example where Jesus hasn't perfectly taught it with like one little tiny story. And it's just like there's no better way. You can't come up with it. It's impossible. So this is the stuff that just constantly. So if you were going to summarize vine and the branches, what would it be?
Abiding.
Yeah, you need to abide. What else has to happen if you're going to produce fruit?
Pruning.
Pruning. So I can't think of a discipleship relationship where you're not going to be talking about abiding in Christ and you're going to have to prune something. God is going to prune things, even if you are producing fruit. I can't think of one. You're always going to be talking about that. What about pigs and pearls?
Giving food they can actually eat.
Giving people things they can receive, right? And what happens when we don't do that?
Bite you.
They bite you. Isn't that true? Anybody else? I mean, just in your personal life, don't you experience this? Like, it's like, man, so it is a kind of on you a little bit, and we know this with children, to give them the appropriate food at the appropriate age that they are. You wouldn't want to give a baby steak. Like, it is partly our job, if we're helping somebody grow, to give them what they can eat. And so if you have a person, they're like, I don't want anything that you're giving me. It may be that you have to make a decision that this isn't a person. You have to wipe the dust off your feet and go on to the next town. It may be the kind of situation where you just love them. And you hang in there with them even though they don't really want your advice, right? They don't want your pearls. What about serpent dove, if you boil that one down? What is the wisdom of a serpent? What makes a serpent smart?
Waiting.
We have to wait. The food comes to you. So our approach is quiet, patient, still, very aware, awake. And then when we go to the door, when we ask and we seek and we knock, we don't kick it in. Like, we come in gentle like a dove. So there's a approach that is gentle and a presence that is awake and aware and ready. I mean, it's this perfect description of, if you want to make a difference in people's lives, you're going to have to be awake. What about plank and speck? What's the bottom line there? I'm combining these.
Fix yourself.
Yeah. Deal with you first.
Yeah.
So it's the whole, like, you're in the airplane and if the oxygen mask comes down, what are you supposed to do? If you have your baby here,
Put yours on first.
put yours on first. Why?
So you don't pass out before you can help anybody.
That's right. So there's a timing situation there. And why do they have to teach that to people?
It's natural.
It's to help somebody who can't help themselves.
Yeah, it's your instinct to go, I'm going to put that mask on my baby first, then you pass out. Now you're both going to die because you don't have oxygen. But if you don't have it, you can't give it. Right?
Right.
So that's the reality of plank and speck, is if you don't have it, you can't give it. Okay, I want to talk today a little bit about the group sizes that Jesus dealt with and the disciplines, and just an easy way to remember them. Okay, so first of all, Jesus had a one-on-one relationship with the Father. He said, I do whatever I see the Father's doing already. So like he's connected with God. He's abiding in his relationship with the Father. He is always asking the Father what he's up to. And then real time, he gets interrupted and he pays attention to what God's doing. Like you see him modeling it, right? So he has that really rich, intimate relationship with the Father. At one point, he goes and he prays all night, and then he comes back and he chooses his disciples. Later, they're complaining or they're being annoying. I can't remember which. And he says, I didn't choose them, Father. You did. So he asked the Father who those people should be. I get that question all the time. People say, wow, I don't know if our group should continue. It's like, well, who's God calling you to disciple? If it's that group, then I would think that's a bad idea. You should keep meeting. But if it's a different group of people, by all means, ditch the current group of people and go get with the people that you're supposed to be discipling, right? So that's God directed. You're only going to know that if God's picking, if God's choosing the people. But then let's say that you have an inner three. These are the sizes that Jesus worked with. He had a one-on-one relationship with the Father. He had an intimate group of 3 guys that he would specifically bring only on certain missions and certain situations. That they were his inner circle. These are the ones he leaned on and they leaned on him. They were his close relationships, which is super encouraging to me because it means you don't have to like everybody you're disciple. You can really be close. You can only really be close to about 3 people, like your core. And people get frustrated and disappointed all the time when their entire group isn't having this deep, intimate relationship with one another. And it's like, that's not possible. Jesus couldn't do that. So I think it's not realistic that you're going to have 50 intimate relationships. You're going to have 3. If you don't have 3, you might be in trouble. You need that, but man, you don't need 15 inner circles, right? And then he had his 12. This is who he invested in at the expense of helping everyone. So Jesus was selective. He fought hard to avoid the crowds to deal with just the 12. He was always taking things from big to small. In fact, like a great example is he makes them bread, right? And they're just like, woo, this is a guy that can make bread. That's pretty exciting. And then he goes up on the hill and prays, and his disciples paddle across the lake. So he's on the hill. It says he's on the hill, so I picture him. I don't know if it's not in the scriptures, but it's pretty obvious, especially if you look at the area, that he would have been watching them try to paddle across this storm. And they're not getting anywhere. And I don't know, it's just my imagination, but I picture him just being like, I don't know why. Maybe that's just me putting that myself on Jesus. I'm the biggest problem, right? Playing inspect. So he goes and he walks across the water, right? Peter jumps out, walks on water, sinks. Remember this story?
Yeah.
So the context is he just fed a bunch of people. He's on the hill. They're stuck on the lake. He walks across the lake. He gets with them, gets in their boat, and then immediately they're on the other side, which I don't understand that, right? But it was like, and now you're on the other side. And guess who comes? All those people you just fed bread to. And what do they want?
Healing.
No, they got healing already. They want more bread. They're hungry. It's morning. And Jesus said, I have bread that you don't know about. And they're like, where's this bread? And they're just super confused by what he's saying. And he's like, I'm the bread of life. Unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And they were like, that sounds crazy. Does sound crazy. They all leave. So he knew how to blow up a 5,000 person church faster than anybody. he got rid of that army like that, narrows it all the way back down to the 12, and he says, are you going to leave me too? But clearly they hadn't left yet, right? And somebody, I think it was Peter. He's the one that always speaks up, but I don't know if it was Peter. Was it Peter? Says, where else would we go?
Yeah.
Only you have the words of life. So why were they there? Life. Yeah, for him. They were there for a different reason. So I'm going to put the 5,000 down here. People always want to change the world or make a big impact. Very dangerous. Can't be done. You can only impact about 12 people. If you want to change the world, that's all you can do. You can't do it through this group down here. Yeah.
Any thoughts on one-on-one discipleship? Is it just not enough?
Hold that thought, because that is a really good question. I just want to get 72 in here, or 70. It's 70, isn't it? In one place it's 72, in one place it's 70. So this is empowered people to go out and do stuff. So we do have a picture, and I just want to throw it in there, of there was a group of people beyond the 12 that they were interacting with and then sending out. And they didn't get the inner circle treatment, but they were part of the group, more in a loose way. A group of women, a group of people that were financing it, the group of people who were going out in pairs to spread the good news. So these groups of people, and most churches, by the way, are 100 people big. Majority of churches in the entire world are 100 people or less. My experience has been in bigger churches, but that's the anomaly by a mile. It's the weirdest thing that's ever happened. We don't know what to do with the fact that churches are huge. People are constantly saying, I get lost in a church that's this big. And it's like, yep, you need a family. Right? You need this, you need this, you need this. This is helpful if you want to get anything done, right? If you want to accomplish a mission bigger than just your lives. This is just a problem that if you can figure out a way to get out of that, out from under that problem and get everybody doing this, that's our goal. It's like, in our church, I want to see lots of these and lots of these and lots of this. This is where the magic is, right here. How do I know this? How did Jesus use his time? I mean, how much of his ministry did he invest where? And then when he left, he didn't say go make churches. He said go make disciples. And everyone would have thought, well, that takes 3 years. And we still don't even know what you're talking about. Right? Because they knew the reality of discipleship, or having rabbis and having students, is the reality is long, complicated, messy business. They knew it. How in the world are we going to reach the whole world if we focus small? Why is going deep going to reach the whole world? What do you guys think? Versus like getting 5,000 people together out in the hills and giving them bread and starting a movement from the 5,000. Why didn't he do that?
I think the limiting factor, if I had to guess, is relationship.
Mm-hmm. You can't have a relationship with 5,000 people. Yeah, it used to be you couldn't communicate with 5,000 people. Not that long ago. Right? Now, one-on-one is, I believe, reserved for the Father. My personal opinion. One-on-one mentoring can be great. It can be very valuable if you have a very mature mentor who recognizes how dangerous it is to have that much influence with no one watching. Counseling is the closest we have to one-on-one right now. And there's all these rules and training around making sure that you don't put your issues on someone else. Because it takes years and years of training and practice and thousands of licensure hours to just not screw someone up more with your stuff. Well, I mean, that's crazy, right? So I just think it's almost too influential of a role with no other eyes on it.
You could almost say you don't have witness accountability.
Right. And this kind of thing can really be abusive in a one-on-one relationship if the person's not healthy. If the person's great and they're healthy and the person's hungry and willing, a mentoring relationship can be fantastic. As long as I wouldn't want to put that in a bubble over here with no oversight, no other eyes on it, no one checking in. Hey, how's it going? I think the women's ministry's done mentoring. Have any of you guys done that, mentoring? So the danger of that is if you get too far out and it's not a good relationship or it's not working, if you don't check back in and go, how's it going? And it's like bad, person doesn't really want to meet with me or whatever, that you need help along the way. But this is the gold right here. Your deep, intimate relationship with God, 2 or 3 people that you are invested in you, you're invested in them, and they're this way, not this, but it's this way. You both need each other. And about 12, and that can include your 3, which really is 11, 10, 9, if we're honest, because these overlapped. Yeah.
What is the difference between mentoring and discipleship?
Yes, so mentoring typically, I'll only add a couple categories. You have counseling, consulting, coaching, mentoring, discipleship. What's the difference? The best description I've ever seen is in one of the books I'm going to bring. I'm going to bring all my favorite discipleship books out one week, and you can flip through them and look at them. Is Lead Like Jesus. And he kind of shows the difference between coaching and mentoring, and he has like a little grid, like a scale. I think the big difference between mentoring and discipleship is mentoring assumes a bunch of things. It assumes that you have a more mature person who has wisdom and knowledge in an area, and a less mature student who wants to learn from that person and glean from them. And so that assumption is built into that relationship. I know stuff you don't know and you want to. You don't know those things and you want to learn those things. It's usually time limited, and it ends, and it doesn't require having a long-term relationship. So it's like miniature consulting. Most consulting is like organizational, where you go into an organization, you go, hey, you're not doing that very well, and you could do this better, and here's something you could do, and hey, maybe you shouldn't have the front of your church be the back of your church. These are the kinds of things that a consultant might say. That's confusing. Right? That's what consultants do. And and what's great about a consultant is they can kind of be like a prophet. They can come in and they can say hard things and then leave. Consultants are great for for kind of shaking things up, making you go, oh, I need to look at that, or I need to think about that, because they're outside of the system. They're not in it. So they can criticize it. Whereas Jesus doesn't do a whole lot of consulting. He doesn't do a whole lot of mentoring. So it's not like those are wrong. In fact, I think they're both really valuable things, but that's, to me, the key difference. The key difference is it's not based in a long-term relationship.
Would you classify Paul as a consultant then, in all of his letters to all the different churches?
Definitely his letters are, right? Yeah, coach, consultant, for sure, because he's criticizing usually. He's like, good job, you're doing these things great. Bad job.
He's pushing.
he stays engaged is pushing them for development, which is kind of the coach model.
Yeah. One key
kind of hit and run sometimes.
One key difference is, though, he did plant those. So he did disciple a little before he left.
Yeah.
And so now when he's coming back in as a consultant, they have a relationship and they're like, hey, I think about you. I miss you all the time. Thanks for the blanket you sent me. You know, those are like what his letters sound like, because why? They have a relationship. So he's not this like cold call.
And it normally goes downhill after that greeting.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're doing this and you're doing this. How dare you, right? I love that about Paul.
Yeah.
But he's very confrontational in his letters. And why I think people maybe sometimes get confused when they over focus on the epistles in their discipleship is because he's talking to specific churches with specific problems and he's consulting them and coaching them on how they can improve them. That's not necessarily what individual discipleship looks like or feels like. It's congregational, it's church leadership. It's more leadership focused than discipleship focused, although he does talk about Timothy a little bit. But it's just sprinkled in there the real intimate personal discipleship stuff. Good questions. So this, when I say, man, now's one of my favorite assignments, write down the names. You know, who are your 12? Currently. These are the people, whether they know it or not, or whether you knew it or not, you are discipling. Here's the weird thing about discipleship. You are making disciples. You are influencing at least 12 people. Or
So you're talking about
you
12
can't help it.
Individual.
12 individual names.
Okay.
So actually get out a piece of paper, everybody, or your phone, a memo or whatever, and write down what those names are. And I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Like, who are your 12? And some of them you might write a question mark next to because you're like, they don't know that God's put them on my radar at all. Or they're on my radar, I don't know why, but God's just going, do, this person. Maybe it's your neighbor. You know, it could be any name.
Informally disciple.
Yeah. Basically, who is if you're a snake and you're not going hunting, right, and they're already all around you and hopping around, who are those 12 people that are already kind of in your orbit already? Like, it's usually not somebody else unless God's calling you to go find some stranger for those slots. And if you raced through that, circle your 3. It's okay if you have a life group and it's no one in your life group. Or if you don't, it doesn't have to make sense. It's just whoever it really is. Here's a fun math problem. We'll have Henry do the math. So if Jesus spent basically, let's say, the equivalent of all day, every day with the disciples for 3 years. And let's say most of that time was looking for wood to make the fire. Someone has to go out and kill a grouse so we can eat it. Like, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that they had to do, right? Like, there's walking from one town to the next. There's a lot of walking. So let's just say 8 hours a day for 3 years. How much time is that? How many hours is that?
6,000.
6,000 hours?
Roughly.
Nine.
Well, if you count weekends off, I guess you don't do that though.
9,000? He doesn't take he took the Sabbath off. We'll give him the Sabbath off.
About 1,100 days times 8 hours.
So 1,100 times 8. So what is that? 8,800?
That's good.
You gave us the weekend off. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's something you like to get from your elders. They're like, you can have the weekend off. So 8,800 hours. So how long would it take me to disciple someone the equivalent amount of time if I met with them weekly for 2 hours?
4,400 weeks.
40, is that right? So 4,400 weeks. How long is that?
Oh my goodness. 52.
It's like 100 years.
Yeah.
80 years, 90 years.
A lot.
Someone's got a calculator. Let's get it. What is
200 weeks would be 100 years. So.
Yeah, it's actually 85 years.
85 years? And I say this not to make us feel bad, but to make us realize like the shallow approach that we have in discipleship. And I'm given a lot of grace because there was like, I'm sure deep, late nights and right. It's not like during the Sabbath they weren't together. They probably sat around all day, you know? Who knows? It's probably longer. So if I was going to really, in the same way as Jesus, make a disciple, just one, or one little group, it would take me 85 years meeting weekly for 2 hours. Is that what we decided?
Yeah.
Isn't that shocking? The amount of investment he made in a few goofy, like difficult, kind of not really popular, unlikely people. The depth of investment that God would make. And I just think I think we do the math wrong. So what we end up doing is being like, all right, I want to make disciples, and then we start going, well, I want to disciple one group, and then I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna, and this is gonna happen, and that's gonna happen. And the reality is, man, 3 years of your life invested in one person. I mean, it would take 85 years. So it's like, okay, but we have the Holy Spirit in us and in them. So that at least cuts it in half, right? It only take us 45 years. So why am I telling you this? Or how does that impact you when you hear that?
Makes you want to select a little more carefully. Or like invest more wisely if it's going to take 85 years.
Yeah, it makes you want to pick wisely. And even if one of them it would betray you, I mean, that's weird math, right? Like knowing full well that one of them is going to betray you and still letting God choose that person. He only gets one shot at this.
I think the other thing it does, at least for me at this moment, is it hammers home the point that being on a journey with other disciples and being no more than a facilitator, the amount of work that we as leaders have to do compared to the amount of work that the Holy Spirit has to do to accomplish the transformation, that is a very humbling number.
It is, isn't it? The first time I did that math, it was right after I wrote out every question Jesus asked. So I got really serious about like, okay, if I was going to just really only look at Jesus and we only did what Jesus did, and we're talking about that all the time, right? We say that's what we're doing. How did he do it? And what if we did that? That's the right questions, right? So what if I ask questions the way that Jesus did? What if I taught the way that Jesus did? What if I actually just taught what Jesus taught? Well, it'd save me some time and energy. I don't have to come up with the content. Right? So it got me going down this road. This number really got me locked up. I remember just being like stuck on it for years. Like, now what? Yeah.
It helps to come back to the anchor, which is it's a process. We're
Yeah.
not reaching perfection.
No, yeah, no.
We're not.
We
don't
can't
have
be
85
Jesus.
years.
Yeah, we don't have 85 to work
I
with.
don't.
I don't have 85 to work with. No. And clearly we're not going to go this deep, but you just see how deep Jesus went. And I think the call is to go deep, not shallow. And so to set our net in the right place and to pay attention to who God's calling us to invest in really matters. And so when people say, man, you know, they've been in that small group for 3 years, they should branch and have 2 small groups. It's like, and those groups should branch in a year from then, and they should each have 2 small groups. How much discipleship is going to happen in that 2 hours that we meet once a week with brand new people that we just met? It's a class. So I think, you know, to me, the gold standard of discipleship is 3. Like, man, it's like 1 with 3 is, because our culture has left us very little time to be with one another. So we're trying to figure out, well, how do I make disciples in the culture that we live in now where I don't spend any time with you ever? And it's like, well, you can't. So the amount of time investment is just to, you know, it doesn't have to always look like a small group. It's like, well, what are we going to do? Have a small group for 8 hours a day for 3 years? It's like, no, it's probably going to look more like we hang out or we do other things other than a study. It's going to look like more time, not less. Like our investment level is so shallow. So this is really helpful for me when I'm thinking about the disciplines. There's up, there's in, there's out, and then there's deep. These are the disciplines of a disciple that Rob talks about. You guys remember that series? This is a way to remember that. So the N one is biblical community. Anybody remember the other ones? Yep, that's up. Private, I'm going to write over here, private devotion. Your intimate relationship with God, your up relationship. Your 1, right? Your biblical community. Your missional living is the out, the serving, the going, the sharing the gospel, the telling other people, you know, that kind of out part. And then the go deep part is kingdom stewardship, which is what we're doing right now, is doing the math. That's what stewardship is, isn't it? Do the math. It's like, look at my life and steward it well. And how do I put the right time in the right places? I better invest in my one-on-one relationship intimate with God, right? If I have a little bit of time left over after that, I'm definitely going to need to have a biblical community or I'm in trouble. Every once in a while, I need to do something that just doesn't benefit me at all, or I go crazy. And I become self-absorbed. I think that's what missional living is for. I think it's like out. It's like go to Waverly, give some people some food, pray for them, and then come back home it is the easiest way to do missions here. It's a 1-day deal. It's a Saturday. It's like
You're done by noon.
you're done by noon. You're up early, but you're done by noon. And you got to experience some not anything about you, all for other people, 100% giving away. It's great. Awesome thing for a small group or a discipleship group to go and do together. This was 2 different teachings that I had. I combined them into this to help me remember. Is that helpful for you when we're talking about the disciplines of a disciple? I forget them if I don't have a way. And so if you forget the names of them, I got to have I got to have some in. I got to have some people investing in me and I'm investing in them. And I've got to have some out where I'm doing something for someone else. And I've got to constantly be like going deep with stewarding my life and paying attention to what am I doing and what do I do with my time, my talents, and my treasures. Is kind of that stewardship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much.
So I wanted us to have kind of a model so that we remember when we're talking about, well, what are we doing in these groups of where we're discipling people? What's the content? Well, it's definitely scripture. We know that. But what are we working on exactly in these groups? What did Jesus do? Well, he took them out. He invested in. He modeled for them up. And then he constantly was having conversations with them about where they're really at and what they're really doing and who they really are. That's down here. So you just can see this is going to create a healthy environment for any group. So whether it's a life group or a women's group or even a mentoring group where you've got a one-on-one relationship, man, instead of today us talking about ourselves, we're gonna make a meal for somebody together, and I have all the ingredients, and we're gonna make the meal, and then we're gonna drive over to their house and give it to them because they're not doing very well, and we're gonna help them out. You just taught more than you could ever teach. You did in 16 mentoring sessions of talking about service, right? Just do it. That's the out part. This is the reflection part of like looking at your life and really asking the hard questions about, well, what am I doing with my time and how am I living my life and what's wasting time and what's draining me and what's filling me up, and like constantly I think reviewing and asking those questions is what stewardship is. You have a kingdom, you have a king, you're supposed to steward your little kingdom. That's what a steward is. You're like a little king or a little queen. And you're supposed to be looking over your empire and going, how does it look? Some leadership and coaching books talk about starting with your room. Have you ever heard that? Clean your room. It's sort of like, don't go way out here. Like start real small and up close. Like, how's my yard look? What's my garage situation? That's what a steward does, is they go, how am I stewarding my life? How am I stewarding my home, my finances, my time with my wife, how am I stewarding my relationship with my kids, or, investing in others? It's like, to me, that's a never ending question and you're always off somewhere. But I'm really excited about just a simple tool to kind of remember that. And then we talked about the different sizes of groups. You started asking some really good questions about that, so I want to give more room for that. So as you wrote out your names, and now I've given you a lot to think about. What questions do you guys have about group size? Who do you need to kick out of your group? Who do you need to bring in? Is there something different you need to do with your group? Do you need to start a group? If you don't have one? Yeah.
I guess for me personally, 3 is very important, because beyond that, just for matters of trust and confidentiality, and if you're gonna really go deep,
Yeah.
you've got to have that intimacy.
Yeah. I think if David and Rob were not super close friends right now, and we kind of have that built in to our work, I'd be in trouble because I need that. Like if I went and worked at Walmart and these guys are busy, I'd probably never see them. If I didn't start a discipleship group where I stuck with my relationship with them, I'd be toast. I need it. And probably they need me too, right? Like it's both ways. I see a lot of people invest in having a life group, but then they're kind of like burnt out and they feel like, man, this isn't meeting the need that I have in my life. It's meeting a need for the people in the group, but it's not meeting the need that I have. And it's sort of like, yeah, I think you need both. I think you need that intimate group and you need that serving, environment. Personally, that's what I think. Not everybody can do all that all at the same time. Like right now, it's built into my work, so it works. But I'm trying to imagine what if I had a life group, a discipleship group, my job. I start panicking. I got to do that for 85 years. It's like, it can get pretty overwhelming.
Numbers, do you see how many of us there are?
Yes. Every week. Every week we ended up with 12. I don't think Myron's going to believe me because I just keep texting him 12.
We'll vouch for you.
Okay.
I have a kind of a strange question, but
I love strange questions.
in my realm, I'm in a small group which meets every week, right? But I'm also realizing that I have small groups that aren't structured as a small group, and I want to share experience. So I told you guys I started this at the table, but I have it going with a couple different groups of people, so it's never the same because there's several in both, right? And the one in my neighborhood started last year, and everything we did revolved around things that were not focused on Jesus. And so I didn't get to go to the first couple, and then I started bringing something a little different, and I would have conversations differently with them to show the love of Jesus, or I would bring an experience or something like that. So we did that all last year. We made tamales in December, and then last Saturday they came to my house and we made homemade pasta. Laughed and everything. We sat down to eat together, and I made choka. And one of my neighbors said, "Can we just stop and pray for this meal?" And I've never asked that at our meetings because I've just been kind of getting into it slowly so that I can bring something different from the love of Jesus. And I'm not kidding. She prayed over that meal, and I wanted to just bawl because it's the first time they've shown that. And their gratitude and their love for all of us in the group has started to change the dynamic. So don't think of a small group just as a church group to get what you need, but that's the missional living, and that's the group that you can show who Jesus is. And it's been amazing.
That's really good. Yeah, and I'm sure, if you think about, Jesus wasn't in any of these guys' circles. Like, if you look at him, he picked, God picked quite a strange group of people that weren't all the way bought in. I was just recently challenged by somebody to have a circle with people that aren't in the church in it. And I was like, I don't know how I could even imagine doing that. Like my whole world, I drive my kids to school at my church. I go to my church. I eat breakfast at my church. I usually have to come back and eat dinner at my church. Like I live in here. It's like a bubble I'm living in, and it's sort of like, that sounds so refreshing to me. Like, I'd love to just hang with my neighbors and pull people in. That's so cool. Really encouraging. And I think that is missional living. That's what missional living is. You're going out and you're bringing people in. What's interesting about it is it's also community, but they're not Christians necessarily.
They are. It's never. There are people who believe, but they're living where I was living 5 years ago, where you know Jesus, you know you're saved, you believe he died on the cross, but you're not putting forth those additional efforts, right?
Okay.
And that's what I
So just kind of nominal.
And so we started changing our dialogue. We've started talking about different things. I ask them questions that are not Bible related, but hey, did you hear about the great thing that happened, blah, blah, blah. And just experiences like that. And it has truly changed the dynamic of our group.
That's so cool. Other thoughts, stories, examples, questions?
I kind of look at the process that you've described, same exact process, slightly different words. I get the sense that my words are that the Holy Spirit has to pour into us before he's ready to pour through us. So that's how I think about it. So if we look at all the various activities, you described them all during the week, work and discipleship, life group, I try to think of, okay, which ones do I feel like I'm being poured into, which strengthen me, fulfill me, allow me to have something that's worth pouring through. So Sunday service is one, the discipleship groups definitely fill me. And then life group is a little more of a working through me because my tank's full enough. There's something
To have something to give.
Yeah, so I kind of look at most of the activities. Does it fill me, or am I filling others?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just the background knowledge is you have to have both, right? You can't keep giving if you have nothing in the tank. And there's a great video. One of Dave Buring's colleagues talks about becoming an all-star baseball player and never leaving the dugout, right? So that's getting filled, but never, filling others, right? You have to come out of the dugout at some point and actually go to the baseball diamond. So anyway, that's how I think about it: being filled and filling others.
Yeah, I love
There
that.
needs to be a balance in there.
Yeah, I heard an analogy once of it's like a good healthy lake has water coming in and water
Yes.
going out.
Exactly.
And if any of those dynamics change, like there's no water going out but water coming in, you have like a big swamp. Or if you have water going out, none coming in, it dries out. And so it's sort of like if you don't have both going, you're in trouble. And you definitely see Jesus invested more time with the Father, I think, than he did with even his disciples. So it's like he modeled that. It's like, man, I need this so that I have something to give here. And then there's the as I go and people are kind of interrupting me in my life. That's where this kind of cool stuff happens. It's good. Any other questions, thoughts? Anybody challenged when you went to write down the questions or the names? Did you find yourself going to write somebody and being like, I don't want that one there? Or I need to add this person even though I didn't really think about them being there? Any examples you guys willing to share? Like, I got a person, you don't have to use their name. Yeah.
I guess my dream is to have a group of 4 where there is a equally high level of commitment.
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure I could find those in my current list.
Yeah, I wonder, and it is interesting, like without the 12, if he could figure out who the 3 were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like those, I wonder if that developed or if that was from the very beginning. Makes me think.
Almost feels like they forced themselves on him, but that's...
Yeah, I'm the one that puts my head on your...
Yeah.
Yeah, but they stood out, I think, in that group. I loved your example where you were like, the first group, it was easy, filled right up. The second group was really easy, filled right up. And then the next group, it was like crickets. Like you ask 20 people and you get 2 responses or whatever. And I think that's interesting. Like different seasons. And there is just a limit to our bubble. No matter how ambitious you want to be with your life, it's like you only have so big of an influence. It's like, this is how big your life is and who is in your bubble. Yeah. Yep. Anybody have a hard time with the inner 3? Yeah. Okay. Because that's why you're saying, like, I've got the bigger, but the smaller is harder. So deeply committed
I mean, part of
guys.
it is I can't think of 3 others who they're all at different stages of life, and I don't know that they have it's maybe may not be the right word, but the bandwidth, the flexibility that I have at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Make that high commitment.
Right.
Can I just make a comment about that? Because I've had some experience with that, and I've learned a lot in this whole journey. And as diplomatically as I can say this, if you're on, it's not up to us to decide whether someone else is prepared and willing to make the commitment for discipleship. It's up to them to decide. And so I have found myself in that situation, and then I thought, I'm too busy, I'm not even going to ask them. And then I thought, I was convicted a little bit at that moment to say, well, first of all, in the business world, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person to do it. They will get it done, right? And in the spiritual world, it's not up to me to decide who's ready. It's up to them. And if you don't ask, you will rob them of the opportunity to say yes. So I've wrestled with that issue, and I've tried to just say, I have no clue whether they have the bandwidth to do it, but there's only one way to find out.
Yeah. The power of invitation. How different would it have been if Jesus didn't go and choose his disciples? If his disciples went out and chose him, that would have been a nightmare.
But by the same token, we also trust God to deliver.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Or deliver us from the wrong people and help us to the right.
Deliver the right people to the group. Please.
Yeah, both. Yeah. It's been surprising to me over the years after doing for 25 years, I've been doing a small group or discipleship groups or different groups, and where I'm, just trying to intentionally invest in knowing people, share my life with them, be real, get in the Word, grow on some level, and all different levels, and it did surprise me, the people who it impacted the most, the people who weren't really impacted, the people who bailed early. It just never went how I expected it to. You just don't know. It's sort of you don't know up front. I was, it's kind of nerdy, but I like to do oil painting, landscape oil painting as a hobby. And so I'll paint something.
Why is that nerdy?
Well, I'm getting there to the nerdy part.
She does it too. That's why she asked.
She's like, I'm not a nerd. So then I take the painting and I go on a Facebook group of other artists and I ask for their feedback.
Oh, okay.
And so nobody else does that. They just post their art paintings.
Yeah.
So they're like, here's my painting. And everyone's like, yep. And then sometimes they're like, I like it, but that's all they do. But I'm like, what would you do different? There's something about this one that's bugging me. I do a clickbait. And then I get 80 people who are professional artists giving me input on how to be a better artist.
Wow.
And so I'm like, I just eat it up, right? And one of the replies to the one, I said, how would you do this one differently if you did the same painting? And they said, you just don't really know until you do it, basically. And of all the answers, that was the most helpful. It's you don't really know until you're in the middle of it where to go with it. So basically they were saying I can't really give you advice because it just depends on how it goes as you're going. And I think that's so true with discipleship. It's you just kind of don't know until you're in the middle of investing in somebody. And one of the main things that we talk about that I think we're maybe the most frustrated is if you are investing a lot in someone's life and it doesn't feel like they really are matching. I think that's one of the tensions. Or how do I even go find those people to be invested in? So there's sort of how do I invite people in? What do I do when they don't show up? And what do I do if they do show up, but only part of them comes? Sort of those are the things that people struggle with, I think, the most. I don't have great answers to all of those, but like, I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Is when you're in a group, you've got somebody, and they're not as invested.
Yeah.
So you invited them, they showed up, and it feels one-sided. Like you're investing, they're not. What would you guys do?
Certainly pray for starters.
Mm.
God.
Yeah, God, tell me what to do with this.
I think I would ask them, what do they want to get out of this? What are you looking for?
Yeah, get
And
clarity.
Yes, exactly.
Because you might have different expectations.
Yes.
I just want to come to a group, be myself, have you love me no matter what I do. Forever. Yeah. Is there ever an appropriate time to, I don't know, move on? Dust your feet off and say, all right, I'm going to invest more strategically time over here instead of over here.
Yeah, but first I think there should be a private conversation.
Yeah.
A real heartfelt.
Yeah, people consistently over the years, as they've started groups, and then they get frustrated with the group for one reason or another, and then they'll be like, God, I feel like God's calling us in this next season to not lead a group. So in a sense, they fire everybody from the group, and then they miraculously end up starting a group later, just without the problem people in it. And I always thought that was so strange. Like, without ever confronting that person or talking to that person or challenging it at all. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, are you, do you have a book to follow, or do you have a basics where to begin? Or how do you do that?
Which one?
Well,
Which, you mean
Where do
to
you
start a
start?
group? Where would you start?
as far as teaching them or helping them to find their way through the Christian journey.
Yeah, I love a bunch of different materials.
Oh, you do?
I'll bring in next week. It will be kind of show and tell. So I will lay out on this front row 15 different discipleship workbooks and different things that I've run into over the years. The one I gave you is really good for a new believer.
Yeah.
So someone who's just, and with Easter not too far off, a lot of times people come forward and accept Christ and then show up to and say, I maybe be willing to be discipled. And it would be nice to know if I could match them up. It's like that would be the perfect book for that. It's like, or someone who's a nominal Christian who doesn't really maybe have a vision for growing in the relationship with God. So they might have been a Christian for 10 years, but they're really kind of new. Yeah.
I think I missed that week. What book are we talking about?
Oh, the one I gave everybody, the little discipleship.
That was the first week. Yeah.
Yeah. Essential Guide to Becoming a Disciple.
It's great. It's really good.
Yeah. It's just really easy. Like it's not intimidating for somebody. It's not a lot of homework. It's a very easy discussion points. So yeah, how do you structure a good group? It's like, all right, we're going to meet for this long. We're going to go through this material. And a lot of the good ones will say, and you're committing, this is the weeding out process, and you're committing that at the end of this, you're willing to start a group with someone else. And that's part of the commitment to even starting the group. Mm-hmm. Well, you're only going to get leaders in that kind of a group, right? It's like, but boy, the replication of that is pretty amazing because now everybody's then stepping into helping someone else. It's a model. A lot of the models are 6, 8, or 12 weeks, and they're foundations of biblical truths.
Like stepping stones.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say curriculums are a great way to get something started. They're not a good long-term solution because you become addicted to the content. and it becomes like Dumbo's feather, like I have to have curriculum to do this. And the truth is, you need that's why I love doing the life groups the way we do it, because it's sort of like, well, you're going to church anyways. There is a sermon, we have content. How about we figure out how to live what we're already learning on Sunday? Like, that just seems so practical to me. So that's one method, is just to be a life group and use the weekly curriculum based off of the sermon. It's just so like practical. Another is to go through scripture and then we're going to read this. Next week we're reading chapter 1 in John, and we're going to talk about it or whatever. I would say the Bible and Sunday are like gold standard best practice. Curriculums are great ways to get a group started. And then they go, I like this, I think we should keep doing it. And then I would roll it into being a life group or being a discipleship group that, gets into the word together. So that's my personal bent, because it's reproducible, it's simple, and you can do really entertaining curriculum forever and not get at some of the most foundational, important things that people don't know about the word, don't know about Jesus. Like I would feel really guilty if Jesus says, all right, so what did you guys do in your small groups? And it's like, did you teach them what I said? Did you ever study Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? It's like, to me, like that would be foundational. It's like, teach them to obey everything I commanded is what Jesus said. So I would say the curriculum for discipleship is the life of Jesus. That is the gold standard, best practice curriculum. John, the book of John, it's gold standard for discipleship. But there's nothing wrong with curriculums and Flourish, and Carrie has a new one that's really, really cool. She was showing me this week that she's going to introduce that's a little bit lighter than Flourish. I think it's
Flourish was yeah, it was really hard.
long. So I think this one's 3 months. And so it's like mentoring, but 3 months. And it's a little bit, the homework's easy, and it's a book instead of a manual. So yeah.
But you just called that mentoring, but that's different from discipling.
Well, I mean, I think both can happen, but that's particularly a mentoring program. Yeah, it's specifically for mentoring. So they're matching people, more mature with less mature, which means you have to have a rubric for figuring that out. And then matching people and putting them, that exists, right? Like we have Flourish, we have discipleship groups and men's and women's. Up to now, kind of have just been rogue. Like, they're happening all over, but nobody's really encouraging, supporting, overseeing. It's just been kind of without a father for a while. And so Will is doing a really good job kind of like reining all that in, finding out where those groups are. What are you guys studying? I just met with the guys who are doing the class, what's the marriage class?
Love and War.
Love and War.
That's been quite something.
Yeah, and it's really rich, and they've had some really cool experiences in the group, but they're like, well, now what? Do we just keep teaching Love and War? It's like, no. You roll these into life groups, and whoever wants to continue, they get into the Word or start to study the sermons and grow in their walk with Jesus. And so it was an on-ramp to some breakthrough in people's lives and their marriages and stuff, but now, and so that's exciting to me. And so there'll be some groups launching out of that.
One question. When you're looking at disciples, like 8 weeks, whatever, discipleship books, how do you figure out what the author's background?
That's why I'm pre-filtering for this group.
Okay.
Yeah, because I don't have time to study them all, but I will tell you these ones are tried and true.
Okay.
I've done them, so I'll just tell you, and I'll bring them in so you guys can look at them. But Discipleship Essentials is a really good one. The Lead Like Jesus is a really good one. The what's the Blackaby, Experiencing God. Experiencing God is fantastic. Those are some of my favorites. The Book of John is top. I would say life groups using the curriculum and having those discussion questions every week is a very realistic one for people that are in the church. It's not meaning, it would make no sense to someone who's outside the church because they're like, I didn't go to church on Sunday and I don't know what you're talking about. So that wouldn't work as well.
How about Dave Urian's for men? Any experience with him?
Oh yeah, ADJ is what I always shorten it, but
ADJ.
Discipleship Journey. I'm so used to calling it ADJ.
Me too.
It's fantastic. In fact, the new one is really well
Yep.
done. And it's a year, right?
Well, not really, it's more than a year.
2 years?
Not quite. It's probably
18
about,
months.
if you go at a leisurely pace with Christmas off and do all the exercises after each chapter, it's about a year and a half.
Year and a half. So it's a pretty big commitment.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like what I would think of as a 1-year certificate in Bible. I mean,
It's a journey.
it is a discipleship
Journey.
journey.
And by the way, and Dave knows I say this because I've said it to him. If you have a copy of the first edition, it makes a really good doorstop. Because the second edition is infinitely better.
Yeah.
And if you look at the first edition, you're completely losing half the value of the work.
Yeah, don't buy that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring that one in. My brother-in-law wrote a really good one that's called Real Life Discipleship.
Yep.
Um,
That one's deep.
yes, and it gets into some of the stuff that we're talking about, my part, your part, God's part, the wheel that we talked about,
There's a focused amount of time and dedication to it. 6 months, 8 months, 18 months. So there's an intentionality with
and an end point.
endpoint discipleship. And it's the overriding goal for them to do unto others, disciple others after that.
Right.
You're finding 2 or 3, they're gonna.
And if you, I think the commitment to have you ever been in one of those lines, like at a coffee place or whatever, and the person in front of you paid for yours, and then they're like, and then you're supposed to pay it forward to the one behind you, no matter what they're going to buy. So basically, everyone is just going to pay for everyone else's, which is communist to me, so I'm not doing it. But I'm very appreciative when somebody does it for me. But I find it so confusing, right? Like, but the pay it forward part of discipleship is where the gold is.
Yeah.
But don't drop the relationship.
Right.
Okay, so there's only so many groups you can father and still be a good dad. So if you get to the end of a group and all of your people in your group, let's say you had 3 people in your group, and they all go and start another group, now you need to factor in the fact that you're going to still be checking in on those guys that are leading those groups and do the math accordingly whether you can continue leading a group or not. Or you're going to have to now be a Paul. Because you might have to be a Paul. And Paul got locked in prison on purpose. God didn't want him planting 50 more churches. Right? He needed him to coach the churches that already were. Okay, so it's like, don't be like Paul, who won't.
That is interesting.
He also wasn't supposed to go to Rome. He was, God, by the way, told him not to go there. And then a prophet told him he was going to get tied up.
Yeah.
And then he was like, no matter what, I'm going to Rome. So I don't know if that was just a dumb decision on his part. People really got mad at me when I said that in one of the videos. It just seemed like not a great call. But anyways, God was probably going to get him in jail anyways. Yeah.
I'm a little confused, and I probably heard something wrong. Are we anticipating that a 3 to 4 person discipleship group would evolve to a life group?
No, those are classes that I was talking about. So the other ones, I think there's 20, 15, 20, 30 people in these classes. There's 3 different marriage classes. And there's, and those, at the end of them, when the content is over, you could all go watch the content again, or you could move on to something else. And so I'm just encouraging them, move on to a small group or a discipleship group, either
Okay.
one.
So are we also anticipating that a discipleship group would only last for a couple of months through that material, for
Yeah.
example?
Well, that's why I threw that, and I know this is hard because I'm not giving you an answer.
Okay.
But the reason why I put the math up on the board is because I think we lean way too shallow in our time commitments. However, you got to meet people where they're at too. And are you going to sign up for a 2-year commitment to anything? I mean, even a gym? It's like, no. So it's very difficult for people to commit to something like that. So I think it's great to start with a simpler, smaller start, and then everyone experience leading someone else through it.
Yeah.
And then maybe go into something
then
longer and
yeah.
deeper. So if I was going to do a college of discipleship here and I lined up the books and I put them in order, infant, child, young adult, parent, where would you guys put ADJ?
Off in the graduate school part.
Grandparent, right? So where's discipleship essentials?
Yeah, it's over here.
Infant.
Yeah.
So then, so I think it matters who you're meeting with,
Yeah.
because then actually the more immature the person, or when, according to this, spiritually, or just where they're at in their life, the shorter term it needs to be, because you're asking people to make a commitment that's just, it'd be like asking a kid to go to a 6-week class on. They're just like, no way. Like they're thinking 1 week at a time. Yeah. So I think, and I'm open to other tools. I just don't have time to look into all of them. And since you guys have invested time with me, I'm open to your thoughts and encouragement. But I wouldn't just go, hey, church, what do you guys think would be a good discipleship material? So what we're doing is we're curating a best practice group of discipleship books, and they'll be in the bookstore.
Okay.
Obviously, you can buy them on Amazon if you don't want to buy them through there. But that way, if you're saying, hey, I want to do a discipleship group, through men's, through women's, or through life groups, you have oversight, you have people checking in with you, how are you doing, and you've got some vetted materials to use, a variety of them. I think I have about 6 or 7, and I'm open to having 10. I just want to make sure they're solid. My good friend Brandon just wrote one called Intentional that I want to check out. It sounds really good, but I haven't read it yet.
So one last annoying question. Are we assuming that discipleship groups will be same-sex?
Yeah, I think almost always. Yeah. I think there's a rare, tiny, small group where there's 3 couples because they all have like 1 million kids. Or there's a few exceptions, but I think most of the time it's, men with men, women with women.
Great.
That's a lot of intimacy, if it was me and 2 ladies, that'd be weird. It'd be awkward for both of us, I think.
There's also, I actually, when I first started in discipleship, thought, wouldn't it be great to be both genders, because there's so many issues, and I've grown to your viewpoint for sure. And part of the basis is it's a very deep, trusting relationship, and men together with men and women together with women have a ton of common ground, which allows you to develop that
You skip
trust quite a bit
steps.
faster and deeper than if you had both genders.
Plus accountability.
Yeah.
'Cause we-
I think part of it is, the accountability reality of developing a very intimate relationship with a woman. But I think also practically, like what you're saying is it's just common ground. You go deep a lot faster and everybody feels safer. It would be weird for me, for instance, to have a better relationship with a woman than she has with her husband.
I don't think that's a good idea.
That's inappropriate.
No.
And not even because that would mean I'm having a deep, intimate relationship with her. It's just deeper than what they've got going on. And that's not healthy. Yeah. All right. That's all I've got for today, unless you guys have questions or thoughts for me. So I'll bring curriculum. We'll talk logistics. We'll dream up what you guys are thinking about doing next week. I'm asking you to, think about Did anybody get the homework and try to do it? It was kind of intense.
Yeah. Did you? Is that just for us, or is that something?
Yeah.
Supposed to schedule private time with you, or?
No, I don't want to look at your homework because it becomes weird spiritual competition, and I don't want us to be like, well, I do this with God and I do this with God, and we're like competing. But we did this with the direct reports on staff, and we did a little retreat, and we said in a non-competitive way, in just a general sense, what are you doing in these areas to grow this year? No judgment, no guilt. Don't apologize. Just what are you doing, and what do you wanting to improve? And we all shared, and I learned a lot from hearing other people's answers. So I think there would be a lot of value, but we also have a really trusted relationship, and we know each other really well. But it was cool to hear other people's answers. I got ideas from listening to other people's answers. So I don't know. Are you guys interested in doing that? Because then you have to do the homework.
Is the homework online?
Yeah, I emailed it out.
Okay.
Last week's email has a link to a document where you kind of, do a deep dive into your own spiritual disciplines. Who else did it? So we got one.
I got as
Two.
far as printing it.
You printed it.
I printed it and then forgot it was
Yeah,
in the printer.
I expected nobody to
So
do
sorry.
it. So and you were the A+ student. So like you two actually. But was it helpful? I mean, just be honest. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it raised some questions.
Yes.
I need to go back to it.
Teach.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a lot to think.
so I would really encourage you to do it, because all it's saying is what are you doing currently,
You know,
and is there any way you want to grow? And it's sort of I wish I was doing this more or whatever. It's just thought provoking about.
and convicting.
It is very.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
were easy, some were really convicting.
Yeah, digging into his material, Comer, I think is his name. He put this thing together. It challenged me a lot. He's the guy that talks about basically people being way too busy.
Yes.
And we implemented Sabbath differently than we ever have before. And man, it's been really impactful, difficult, but really impactful. And I was just surprised. I don't know. It was good. So it's okay to say I don't have time to do that. But if you did have time, you guys think you want to talk about that next week?
Sure.
I'd be game for sure.
Okay. So I'll have the books. Let's kind of talk about what we're all feeling like God's calling us to do. I'll find out are there any new men's or women's groups that are launching out of this, which I hope. And I'll give that information to everybody. They're all the right people. And then you're off and running. And I'm not going anywhere.
Is next week our last week?
Next week will be a wrap-up kind of week, unless we get to the end of it and we go, we need one more. And then, good?
Can I be the first to remind the group that next week is daylight savings time?
Oh,
Oof.
So we will be meeting an
More.
hour earlier in the day.
It'll be just a little more sleepy.
6 becomes 7.
Grab your coffee on the way.
I know.
All right. Bless you guys.
Thank you
Thanks for making time to do this.